We live surrounded by screens, noise, and rush, yet inside, the emptiness screams. If this reflection speaks to you, consider liking and subscribing. It's a way not to walk alone in this modern silence that we all feel, but few admit.
You're free. You can go anywhere, become anyone, choose anything. And yet, you wake up every day with that quiet weight on your chest, the feeling that no matter what you choose, it's never enough. Freedom was supposed to make us happy. Instead, it made us restless. We scroll through infinite options, convinced that the next choice will fix the emptiness. The next job, the next person, the next version of ourselves. But the more doors open, the less we know who's walking through them. Modern life taught us to believe that more choice means more control. But Kierkegaard warned us, freedom without direction becomes vertigo. And Bauman showed us that in a liquid world where everything must stay flexible, we dissolve too. Our identities, our desires, even our sense of peace. This video is not about how to make better choices. It's about why choosing anything at all has become unbearable. Why satisfaction always slips through your fingers the moment you think you found it. Because maybe your misery isn't failure. Maybe it's the symptom of a freedom too vast to carry. Stay until the end, because what begins as paralysis may end as clarity. The moment you finally understand why the door that traps you is the same one that can set you free.
You were told that freedom means having options, but no one told you that options could become a kind of prison. Every day, you wake up standing in front of invisible doors, each one whispering, you could be more. You could change your job. You could leave that relationship. You could move, start over, reinvent everything. And in that constant could, something starts to break. Kierkegaard called it the dizziness of freedom, that strange anxiety that appears not when you're trapped, but when nothing is stopping you anymore. It's not fear of losing what you have, it's fear of all that you could have had. Because the moment you choose one life, you silently kill 1,000 others. And you try to comfort yourself by believing that one day you'll know which door was right. But that day never comes, because every choice you make exists beside the ghosts of all the choices you didn't. You start living in comparison with your own possibilities, a constant negotiation with the lives you abandoned. The result isn't freedom. It's a slow erosion of presence. And here's the cruel part. Your mind knows this. It replays the paths not taken, the alternate versions of yourself that might have been happier, stronger, more admired. You start living not in the present, but in the echo of possibilities that never existed. You call it indecision, but it's not indecision, it's grief. Grief for the lives you'll never live, for the faces you'll never meet, for the doors you'll never open again. And grief doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It transforms into distraction, into overthinking, into the compulsive need to always keep the next option open. You start calling it self-improvement, but deep down you know it's fear wearing the mask of growth. Fear of settling, fear of missing out, fear of finding out that even your best choice might not save you. And this is where the trap begins. Because the modern world feeds on that grief. It tells you there's always another chance, another product, another person, another upgrade. That satisfaction is just one more choice away. And you believe it because it's easier than accepting loss. But the more you chase, the emptier it feels. you start to realize that maybe freedom isn't a gift. Maybe it's a test. Because to live freely isn't to keep every door open. It's to close them and stay. Still, the idea terrifies you, doesn't it? That commitment could be the real form of freedom. It feels like surrender. But as Kierkegaard would say, the leap of faith is never rational, it's existential. And maybe, just maybe, this is where we've gone wrong. We confused infinite choice with real freedom. We thought more doors meant more life. But the truth is, the more you open, the less you belong anywhere. You can feel it, can't you? That quiet ache that says, I could have been so many things, and now I don't even know who I am. Because when you're always standing in front of endless doors, motion becomes impossible. You start mistaking movement for meaning, jumping between jobs, people, and dreams, hoping that speed will hide the emptiness. But the more you run, the more the ground dissolves beneath you. And soon, you're not choosing anymore. You're drifting. Keep that thought, because what happens when the world around you becomes liquid, when even meaning starts to melt, is where the real collapse begins. And that's where we're heading next.
Kierkegaard warned us about the dizziness of freedom, but he couldn't have imagined the world we live in now. A world where that dizziness isn't a moment, it's the whole atmosphere we breathe. Sociologist Zygmunt Bauman called it liquid modernity, a time when nothing solid can last long enough to hold meaning. And he was right, because everything around you is designed to keep moving. Jobs, relationships, identities, even truths. If something stops, it drowns. So you learn to keep floating, even when you're exhausted. But here's the trick. When everything must remain flexible, you can't truly hold on to anything. Not people, not beliefs, not even yourself. And before you notice, life becomes a constant negotiation between comfort and disappearance. You tell yourself you're adapting, but deep down you know you're dissolving. Every time you try to belong, something inside whispers, "Don't stay too long, it won't last anyway." That's how the liquid world trains you, to mistrust permanence, to worship motion, to call instability freedom. And the more you flow, the less you exist. Bauman once wrote that in a liquid society, identity becomes a project, not a given. That means you must constantly reinvent yourself to keep up. New goals, new labels, new aesthetics, new masks. You curate your existence the way a brand curates an image, updating, adjusting, deleting, until eventually you don't know what's authentic anymore. And that's the point, because authenticity can't be monetized. Still, something inside you rebels. You feel that faint longing for stability, for someone or something that stays. But in a culture where everything must remain replaceable, commitment feels like failure. So you move on, again and again, calling it progress. And yet each new beginning feels smaller than the last. Maybe that's the hidden wound of our age. We think we're chasing freedom, but we're just afraid of standing still. Because standing still would mean meeting ourselves. And that's the one confrontation we keep postponing. You can sense it in every scroll, every swipe, every promise of something new. The algorithm whispers, "Don't stop, there's always more." And so you drift, half asleep, believing you're choosing. But what if the current was never yours to begin with? Think about it. If you stop moving, the silence feels unbearable. If you keep moving, you lose shape. Either way, you start disappearing into the noise. That's not evolution, that's evaporation. And here's the paradox. You've never had more access, more connection, more information, and yet the feeling of inner emptiness keeps expanding. Because the liquid world doesn't want you to find meaning, it wants you to keep searching for it. Meaning, after all, is bad for consumption. Once you know what matters, you stop needing everything else. So it distracts you with choices, with speed, with novelty. It sells you the illusion of control while quietly shaping every desire you think is yours. Freedom becomes just another product, updated, redesigned, repackaged. And you, the buyer, call it me. But there's something the system didn't calculate. The human remainder that refuses to dissolve. That tiny, stubborn part of you that still longs for weight, for roots, for something that doesn't move. You can feel it when you pause in the middle of the chaos, that strange ache that says, I miss what I've never had, a life that feels real. Hold that feeling, because that's the beginning of resistance. Not rebellion against others, but against the current itself. And if you think this is just poetic, wait until you see how the illusion of choice feeds on that emptiness. That's the next layer of the trap, and the one we're about to open next.
You think you're choosing. You think you're in control. But what if every choice you make was already designed for you to make it? We call this freedom, but it feels more like choreography. Every swipe, every purchase, every yes and no is part of a pattern you didn't write. And the cruelest part? You feel free while following it. That's the beauty of the system. It doesn't need to force you. It just keeps giving you options. So many that you forget to ask who built them. Bauman said the modern consumer doesn't buy products. He buys identities. And that's the trick. Choice becomes self-expression, and self-expression becomes performance. You're not deciding anymore. You're auditioning. Auditioning for attention, for belonging, for validation. The algorithm doesn't care what you choose, as long as you keep choosing. And here's where it gets darker. Because what happens when choice becomes constant? It stops meaning anything. When every door is open, the act of walking through one loses its weight. So you keep opening new ones, hoping one of them will finally feel real. But it never does. It's not satisfaction you're chasing. It's relief from the pressure of deciding. You can feel that pressure every time you stare at a screen, lost between 10 versions of the same thing. Your mind whispers, pick one. Your heart whispers back, what if the other one was better? And so you hover, half in, half out, never really choosing, never really resting. This is the illusion of choice. It's not about what you can choose, but how the abundance of options becomes another kind of control. Because when everything looks available, you forget to notice that everything feels the same. You can sense it in small ways, how every song starts to sound familiar, how every opinion begins to echo the last one, how every person you meet feels slightly predictable. The world isn't shrinking. Your perception is. Flooded with options, your attention fragments until even meaning becomes disposable. That's why you scroll without remembering what you've seen. That's why you consume faster than you can digest. Choice is no longer liberation, it's sedation, a constant flood of could that numbs the pain of not knowing what you truly want. And still you keep hoping that the next thing will fix it. But it never does it? You buy the course, change the job, end the relationship, and for a moment it feels like control. Then silence. Then the same hunger again. It's not failure, it's the system doing exactly what it was built to do. Here's something most people never realize. The illusion of choice is not meant to make you decide. It's meant to make you doubt. Doubt yourself enough to keep searching outside of you. That's how the market survives, by turning your uncertainty into profit. Kierkegaard once said that the self that cannot choose becomes despair itself. And maybe that's the tragedy of our time. We mistook endless preference for authentic choice. We became experts in deciding everything, except
who we are. You feel that, don't you? That strange exhaustion that comes after freedom? That's not laziness, that's soul fatigue. A mind stretched too wide to touch anything deeply. But there's something else under that fatigue, a faint pulse. It's the part of you that still remembers what real choice feels like, the kind that costs something, the kind that leaves marks. Because to choose, truly, is to lose and keep walking. You've been taught to fear that loss, but maybe that's the only doorway left that still leads to yourself. Stay with this thought, because what comes next will confront that fear directly, the fear of commitment, and the quiet truth that freedom might not be about having choices, but about having the courage to stop looking for them.
Every generation believes it's freer than the one before. But look closer, and you'll see that the modern version of freedom is built on avoidance. Not rebellion, not courage. Avoidance. We run from endings, from stillness, from definition itself, because once something becomes defined, it can also be lost. And that's our greatest fear, not failure, but finality. Kierkegaard called it despair, the sickness of wanting to be everything while refusing to become anything. You keep every door half open, just in case. You love halfway, commit halfway, believe halfway, hoping that indecision will protect you from regret. But that's the illusion. The more you try to keep every path alive, the more lifeless they become. You know that feeling when something starts to get serious, a relationship, a project, a promise, and suddenly you feel the urge to pull away? That's not intuition. That's fear wearing the mask of freedom. It whispers, "Don't get stuck," as if depth were a trap, but staying shallow is what keeps you drowning. Bauman once said that in a liquid society, love itself becomes disposable. A momentary connection quickly replaced when it asks for effort. We call it compatibility, timing, boundaries, but most of the time it's simply fear. Fear of being seen too clearly, of having to stay after the beauty fades, so we swipe, we scroll, we vanish, and call that liberation. But freedom without attachment isn't freedom. It's drift. And drift doesn't lead anywhere. It just exhausts you slowly. You can feel it in your chest, can't you? That ache that appears when something real asks for your full presence. It feels heavy, uncomfortable, like being asked to breathe underwater. That's the weight of meaning, and we've forgotten how to carry it. Because commitment isn't about losing possibilities. It's about gaining gravity. It's what pulls you back into your own orbit, what turns a life into your life. But we've built a culture allergic to gravity. A culture that tells you, if it gets hard, walk away. If it hurts, it's wrong. If it lasts, it's dangerous. And so every time we run, we confuse relief with freedom. But relief fades. Freedom remains empty. And deep down, you start to crave the very thing you've spent years escaping. Something that holds you still. Here's the paradox no one talks about. The moment you commit to something real, fear doesn't disappear, it transforms. It becomes meaning. The trembling stays, but now it has direction. That's the courage Kierkegaard was pointing to, the leap not away from uncertainty, but through it. And maybe this is what freedom was always supposed to be. Not infinite doors, but one doorway you dare to walk through completely. Not control, but surrender. Not safety, but intimacy with what could break you. You won't find that message trending anywhere, because nothing sells worse than permanence. But still, you feel it, don't you? That quiet part of you that wants to stop running, that's tired of floating, that wants to belong to something again. Keep that feeling close. Because what comes next isn't about losing the fear, it's about learning what it was trying to protect. And when you finally see it clearly,
you'll understand why freedom without roots was never freedom at all. That's where we'll end, where the doors stop multiplying and one step forward becomes enough. All this time, you thought the pain came from not knowing which door to choose, but maybe it came from never daring to choose at all. Because every unmade choice leaves a ghost behind, and you've been living with their whispers for too long. The voices of what could have been, what should have been, what might have made you happier if only you'd been braver, sooner, different. But here's the truth you've been running from. You will never have enough information to be certain, or enough time to try them all. Life isn't meant to be optimized, it's meant to be lived. And living means closing doors. The world told you that freedom means keeping everything open, but it forgot to mention the price, that an open life is often an empty one. Bauman tried to warn us, when nothing lasts, even joy becomes temporary. Kierkegaard warned us too. The self that refuses to choose eventually disappears. They weren't being pessimists. They were describing exactly this, the ache you feel right now. But what if that ache isn't punishment? What if it's invitation? The invitation to step into one reality fully, to stop grazing on infinite lives and finally taste your own. You've been standing in front of these doors for years. You've analyzed, hesitated, negotiated, and maybe you needed to. Maybe that's how you learned what matters. But now, the silence is different, isn't it? It's not asking for another answer. It's asking for a decision. Because no amount of thinking will ever replace the moment you simply reach for the handle. Not the perfect choice, just yours. And when you finally step through, the world won't explode, but something inside you will settle. The noise will fade, the ghosts will quiet, and for the first time in a long time, you'll feel the ground again. So go ahead. Let the other doors close. Let them echo for a while, then disappear into the distance. Because the truth is, you were never meant to walk through all of them. You were meant to walk through one. That's the secret Kierkegaard tried to whisper across centuries, that freedom isn't infinite. It's chosen. And maybe Bauman was right too, that in a liquid world, the bravest act isn't to flow, but to stay. And so, the question remains, not which door is right, but which one will you finally call home? Because the door you choose is not where your freedom ends. It's where it begins.
If this moved something inside you, stay. We're building something for those who don't fake it. Subscribe. Not just for the content, but for the confrontation. And if this left a wound, maybe it was meant to. Sometimes the best way to go deeper is to share the pain. Share it. You've spent years waiting for the moment you'd finally feel ready, but maybe readiness was never the point. You don't need another sign or another plan. You just need to begin where you are. The life you keep postponing isn't out there. It's the one quietly waiting on the other side of hesitation. And the longer you wait to live it, the heavier the doors become. So stop rehearsing the future. Step in. Let reality meet you halfway.